How do you help writers find the emotional spine of their story?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question. So the emotional spine is the most important thing. It is the most important thing. And oftentimes it's one of the last things that becomes really clear, because sometimes you have to write through a bunch of stuff to actually realize what the emotional spine is of your story. But one way that I work with writers on finding the emotional spine of their story is by using the hero's journey. And the reason I actually like that story model is I think it's the deepest kind of psychological model, and it really is about fear and facing whatever darkness we have in ourselves, in pursuing what we want. And so what I do with writers when they're, sometimes writers have a really great story, but I'm like, what do they want? What's the emotional growth? Like, what's their flaw? What's their problem? We actually do kind of talk through this idea of the hero's journey. And often what's missing is like a fear. Like, some people write main characters that are like perfect. Like, they're just good people and they always do the right thing. And it's like, after a while, it's kind of like, wow, the secondary characters are really fun and interesting, and your main character is just kind of like dull, And so how do you take some of that juice that you've given your secondary characters and really create a main character who's complicated and flawed, And it's so good to have a character that has a flaw, because then they make mistakes, which creates more conflict. And then they do things out of fear, which allows us to understand them more deeply, and create structure, which creates structure for us. So what I do is we sort of talk through, okay, what is your character afraid of? Like, what is their emotional need? Let's say it's love and connection. And let's just say they're afraid of being rejected, just to pick a really simple example, right? And so I encourage writers to think about, why are they afraid of being rejected? Like, what happened to them? What happened to them? And to actually write that scene, even if it's not going to be in the movie. Like, what is the scene where they were rejected in some really primal, deep way? Then they are grounded in that character's backstory, and they don't have to do a flashback, but everything they write is going to be infused with that thing that happened to them. And it's going to infuse the way that they interact with the world and how their fear gets triggered, right? And so a great character, let's say they got rejected in their past, and they're going along in their life and they want love, but they don't have it. And the call to adventure is, oh my God, that person, that's my person. But they refuse the call because they're too afraid of being rejected, right? Again, so we're getting internal conflict. And then, maybe I can do it this time. Maybe I can actually put myself out there. So they talk to their friends, or they get some guidance from somebody, like in the meeting the mentor section of the hero's journey. And they realize, like, if I do this, then maybe I'll be able to be with that person. And so they decide to go for it, and they commit to, like, I'm gonna make that person love me, and they set off on their quest. And now we're in Act 2, and they go for their goal. And there's people who are helping them, like, yeah, he's really into you. Let's do this, and people are trying to stop her. I'm just gonna say it's a she at this point, like, you're not his type. He likes this other girl. Like, putting that fear, so that fear is externalized through a character that can press on that character in the story. But they really want that person so bad. And so they keep moving forward. And the middle of Act 2 in the hero's journey is called Approach to the Inmost Cave. And the way to think about your story in this section is that in the cave is the treasure, which is that person that she wants to fall in love with her, right? And she really wants that person really badly. But the cave is made up of her fear. Because she wants him, she's going to go for him. But as she's going for him, she gets more and more vulnerable. And so her emotions get triggered, and she's afraid. And maybe, a lot of times in a romantic comedy or a romance story, the midpoint in Act 2 is a kiss or some kind of intimate connection. And that triggers, let's just say for our character that we just made up right now, that triggers her fear, like, oh my God, I'm So she pushes away again to protect herself. And the other person's like, wait, what's going on? I thought and she's, and then she does something even more sort of out of her fear. And now she's at the end of Act 2, she's completely alone. She's blown it and she's failed. And that person is with someone else. And she's never, ever going to have that person love her. Okay? But then maybe the mentor comes in, or maybe she discovers something that allows her to believe she has a chance, one more chance. And so she decides, I'm gonna try to get him one more time. And that launches her into Act 3. And then there's that race, where she's trying to get to the person, whatever. And in that scene, she has to face her fear, the classic cliche version of this is like, she's running to the airport. Oh my God, he's leaving on a plane. She gets there and there goes the plane. He's gone, right? So that death of her dream at the end of Act 2 where she failed is reenacted once more. And it's like, oh my God, she's not gonna get what she wants. But then she turns and there he is. He didn't get on the plane. Or he goes on the plane and he leaves. And in a scene that happens after that, they meet again by accident or something. And she tells him how she feels. And she opens herself up and she's completely vulnerable, which is her growth and her transformation. And because she's grown and because she's revealed her true feelings, he's like, hell yeah, I'll be with you. And she gets what she wants. So the hero's journey, by creating this idea of the fear in the character and actually grounding it in a real thing, that's something you can play with in the story to create emotional growth for the main character. And another way that I like to think about creating emotional structure for the character in the story is that, how are they going to change? And this may be a Richard Walter thing again. I don't know if I'm pulling this from Richard. I probably am. But I think in his book, he talks about this idea of like a bow and arrow. And if let's just say at the end of this movie that you're writing that she's going to stand before him and say how much she loves him and be really vulnerable. So that's where the arrow lands, right? So in creating the arc, the emotional arc, you want to pull that arrow back as far away from that as you can so that it looks like there's no way she can ever be vulnerable with anybody, okay? So that you're creating this polarity in the story of who she is at the beginning, what her belief system is about herself and the world, and then how it changes at the end. And then you're kind of building the emotional journey between those two poles. So that's another way to think about creating emotional structure.
As you were speaking, it was taking me back to 16 Candles.
Oh my gosh!
So
yes.
I realize I'm going back a few years.
Yes.
But I'm thinking of the Molly Ringwald character.
Yes.
And she's feeling left out because her sister's wedding, right?
Yes.
And everybody's busy.
Yes.
And then she has the crush on Jake.
Jake.
Right.
Yeah.
We all remember Jake.
Jake.
He's got like sort of the cheerleader girlfriend, and in her mind, he's totally unattainable, but he was perfect.
Right.
And so she's at the dance, and then she gets sort of this unwanted attention, but it's part mentor, right? The one character, and forgive me, was it Anthony Michael Hall?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he was awesome in the film, and he's kind of a mentor, but he's also trying to pick her up.
Yeah.
And so... and then we don't want to spoil it, even though the movie's 30 plus years old. Okay, all right. It's been a little.
Yeah.
But so then there's the moment where there he is.
Yes.
And it's the awkward, and I forget, he's got his car. He probably has like this Porsche or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they have the weird conversation, and so I'm thinking of that. That's exactly how it plays out.
The all is lost. Right. At the end of Act 2, we have it where the person is with someone else, and then the character has to kind of relive it in the climax again, right? That character of Jake, it's so interesting because I watched that movie a few months ago. His character is so problematic.
Oh, is he?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to watch it from 2021 back and going, oh yeah, we thought that was okay or whatever. A lot of the stuff that happens in that movie. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, that emotional structure of like, there he is,
right.
and Yeah, and sometimes the way that that emotional growth happens in the climax is also, like the hero is sort of in the climax. It looks like they're not going to get what they want again. That person's gone or whatever, but because of what they've learned on the journey, they do something emotionally they never could have done at the beginning of the movie, and because they do it in that moment, they actually get what they want, and they might not get it in the way that they wanted or thought they would get it back then, but it could be in a new way that is actually even better than the way they thought they were going to get it.